Faded Hearts, Book 2 in the Faded series by Becky Flade, published by Tirgearr Publishing, www.tirpub.com/bflade, Chapter 1. Come on, baby, you can do it. Henley Elliott patted the dash of her 20-year-old Grand Prix and coaxed it over the hill. She loved the old green car, her first and only since getting her driver's license her senior year of high school, but it was on its last leg and Henley knew it. As the car chugged over the peak, she took her foot off the gas and coasted down the other side. She enjoyed the speed and the view as the valley opened. She didn't blame the car for wanting to quit. She was tired, too. She was exhausted from constantly running, always looking over her shoulder, jumping from town to town. She hoped she'd gone far enough to be safe. She had almost convinced herself she would be, that it would be okay to settle for a few weeks in the next town. She'd done preliminary research online at a public access computer in the library a few miles back. Though a small and rural community, the next town appeared metropolitan enough to provide lodging and work for a while. She had too much dust on her shoes and needed to call somewhere home. Trapper's Cove was as good a place as any. As gravity pulled the limping car downhill, farms gave way to a residential area that must have bordered the town proper. The houses, small and large alike, were old but well maintained. They showed tradition, respect, and pride. Henley glanced at her dashboard clock. It was noon on a Wednesday in late April. Kids were in school, but she imagined later they would play in their yards and ride bikes in the street. Young women chatted over fences as they hung laundry on clotheslines. It resembled a scene out of a television show from her childhood, or the Lifetime movie she'd caught in a motel last month. Henley smiled. It was charming. She loved it. Her smile faded as the road leveled and her car slowed. No, baby, just a little bit further, she pled. She pulled the car off the side of the road in time for it to roll to a stop, shudder, cough, and die. She laid her forehead against the steering wheel and sighed. She didn't have much money and feared the car needed massive repairs. It was a miracle her baby had made it this far. Trapper's Cove would be home for the next little bit, once she got there. Her immediate problem was getting herself into the main part of town, followed closely by locating a mechanic who would tow the vehicle in with only the promise of payment. Then she'd worry about securing lodging and employment. Henley grabbed her purse and the backpack she kept filled with a couple days' worth of necessities, locked the Pontiac loaded with the rest of her meager belongings, and began walking west. Late April in Minnesota wasn't exactly balmy, so she dressed that morning in jeans and a long-sleeved tee. Always practical, Henley had also wrapped a sweatshirt around her waist in case she needed it. But after a few miles of walking in the afternoon sun, she began to perspire. Her hair clung to the back of her neck and her shirt grew clammy. With practiced skill, she pulled the long brown locks into a sloppy bun and secured the knot with a scrunchie she kept on her wrist. She pushed the sleeves up to her elbows and nudged her sunglasses higher on the bridge of her nose. She heard the truck approach. It came around the bend in the road and into view, its appearance as dilapidated as it sounded. She kept her gaze on the horizon, but the truck slowed to a stop parallel to her regardless. She expected to see a grizzly old farmer behind the wheel, his teeth yellowed from tobacco, dressed in flannel and suspenders. She knew it was a snobby presumption, but she'd seen more than a few on her travels, and they drove similar trucks. Instead, the man behind the wheel of the once blue jalopy appeared to be close to 40, and he was pretty. She doubted he'd appreciate the description. In her experience, not many men would, but it was the first word that came to Henley's mind. His dark brown hair needed a cut, the ends curling around his ears and nape. He had blue eyes framed in thick black lashes, a day's worth of stubble though it wasn't yet 3 o'clock, and a cleft chin. His full bottom lip curved seductively as he smiled at her in an amused but condescending fashion that suggested women tended to stare and he thought it was funny. She realized her mouth hung open and snapped it shut. She tucked her hands in her back pockets. She wasn't sure what else to do with them, but the move thrust her ample breasts forward, and the pretty man's smile widened exponentially. Sweet baby Jesus, some things in life aren't just. Hi, can I help you? My car broke down about 3, maybe 3.5 miles back. Okay, she sounded like a functional human being. I'm going to Trapper's Cove. Well, you're heading the right way, his smile warmed. I'd be glad to give you a lift. My name is Carter McAllister. I'm okay walking, but thanks. Sure, I get it. Not safe accepting rides from strangers. He shrugged, but his eyes twinkled. It's not really safe offering a ride to a stranger these days. He creased his forehead in an exaggerated expression of suspicion. Are you a crazed axe murderer? Henley tilted her head and considered him. Recently reformed. I've adopted my own version of AA's 12-step program. You'd probably be okay. She enjoyed the full throaty sound of his surprised laughter. He didn't speak like a Midwesterner, yet she couldn't place his distinctive accent. Her pulse thrummed in a delicious rhythm she hadn't felt in a long time. He was probably harmless, but a frisson of sexual awareness and probably harmless weren't good enough reasons to override basic caution. For both our sakes, I think I'll walk, but thanks again. You're welcome. He nodded to her as he drove away, and she resisted the urge to glance over her shoulder at the retreating tailgate. The hike into the town's business district took close to an hour. She had to remind herself that she'd vowed to get more exercise and that it was a nice day each time the nagging little voice told her she should have taken the hunky Carter up on his offer. A diner called to her like a beacon. Her stomach growled in response, and Henley pointed her feet in that direction. She pulled on a large, heavy door, walked through the entrance, and went back to the 1950s with the wide counter, vintage stools and booths, the mirror stretching across one wall reflecting all the charm and kitsch back onto itself, and a buxom blonde woman with hair teased beyond the laws of gravity and wearing a pink waitress uniform complete with a lace doily pinned to her breast by a name tag. Hey, honey, you're flushed. The waitress approached quickly, but not so fast as to be on skates, and a quick look down at the waitress's crepe-soled, sensible white lace-ups confirmed the conclusion. Henley was glad for it. Skates would have cheapened an otherwise delightful ambiance. She hoped the food proved as good as the decor. My car died a few miles outside town, and I walked the rest of the way. She checked out the name tag, Stella. I'll sit at the counter if that's okay. That's fine. I'll get you a glass of ice water while you look at the menu, and the specials are on the board over there. Stella hurried. She moved like a freight train. Old man, where are Tala's cheese fries? Enjoying the argument in which the cook and waitress were now involved, Henley climbed onto a stool and pretended to read the menu. A glass of water slid onto the counter, and Henley glanced over the edge of the laminate page. Stella winked and returned to what Henley guessed was a familiar routine between the waitress and the cook. The menu boasted standard diner fare and reasonable prices. She was dithering between two different offerings when she felt a presence at her elbow. Glancing down, she noticed an attractive little girl with long curly hair the color of wet sand, freckles, and the most astonishing green eyes staring up at her. Well, hello. Hi, my name is Tala. Sometimes I get to go to Philly to visit my mom's family, and once we went to Ireland, it's very wet there. Philly was crowded and dirty, but we didn't get to stay there. We stayed in the suburbs, and my mom said people from inside the city don't like it much, and people from the suburbs claim Philadelphia is theirs. Where are you from? I'm having cheese fries and a milkshake. Ma Stevens makes the best milkshakes. What's your name? Henley didn't know where to begin. Not that it mattered. A petite, curvy redhead with the little girl's freckles and cheekbones came over laughing. Tala, baby, go sit down and leave the nice lady alone. Ma brought over your cheese fries. The child let out a gleeful whoop and raced away. I'd apologize for the tiny tornado, also known as my daughter, and her impromptu act as welcoming committee. But I enjoy her curiosity and her energy, encourage both, and to apologize for it would make me a hypocrite. I detest hypocrites. She looked back over her shoulder, and Henley followed her gaze. The little girl happily bent the waitress's ear and munched on fries. Henley took advantage of the momentary distraction to assess the mother. She wore her auburn hair cropped in a short cap of messy curls. Her faded blue jeans had a blown-out knee, and she wore a Foo Fighters t-shirt under an open blue Oxford. And she had on Chucks. Henley realized the woman had her hand out. It shamed her to be caught acting rudely. I'm Maggie Gale. Henley Elliott. Your daughter's charming, and you're right not to apologize for her. I'm afraid she took me by surprise, though. I couldn't quite keep up. Henley didn't touch people if she could help it, but the other woman's hand remained extended. Left with few options, Henley fit her palm into the one that was offered. She had a firm, warm handshake. Henley found little she couldn't admire about the woman, but that didn't mean she didn't make Henley nervous. Not a lot of people can keep up with her, Maggie laughed. It was a pleasure to meet you. Enjoy your lunch and the town. Maggie hadn't walked but a few feet when the name rang a bell for Henley. Wait a second. The redhead paused and turned. Maggie Gale, as in the author M.A. Gale? Guilty. Are you serious? I love your books. You're the reason I bought a Kindle. Maggie quirked one eyebrow in an affectation Henley had always envied. I prefer a real book. I enjoy the feel, the smell of the paper, growing a collection, seeing it on the shelf. There's a certain satisfaction you lose with electronic books. And of course, hardbacks are the best, but I travel a lot, and, books are heavy. Her voice trailed off at the end, and Henley felt awkward. What was wrong with her today? She moved anonymously from one place to the next and found it easy to converse with strangers made that possible. But twice a day she found herself tongue-tied while speaking with other adults and struck completely dumb by a small child. She sipped her water and wished her car would appear outside, completely repaired and ready for a quick getaway. "Would you care to join us?" "Pardon me?" Maggie's quick laugh was too warm for Henley to find insulting. "Would you like to join Tala and me at our booth?" Henley played with her water. She knew she shouldn't. It wasn't wise. She wouldn't be here long enough to make friends, not that she would if she were. It was safest to keep to herself and avoid the inevitable questions. But she'd been living alone on the fringes of society for such a long time she couldn't deny the spark of longing the invitation ignited. It wouldn't hurt to join the mother and her precocious daughter, would it? She looked up to find Maggie gently smiling at her. "Don't think about it too hard. Go with your gut. It's rarely wrong." "Mine usually is," Henley said, and bit the inside of her cheek. "Oh, sweetie," Maggie held up a hand. "Your business. I won't pry." "Oh, that's such a lie. I'm totally going to pry. I can't help it. I used to be a journalist a lifetime ago." Tala is genetically inquisitive. But I do have more patience than the 10-year-old, and I can promise no interrogations during lunch, okay? "Okay." Henley grabbed her water and slid from her stool. 10? Yeah, she's small for her age. She also got her stature from me. But she swears she's going to have a growth spurt soon and be tall like her daddy. It could happen. She's got a lot of growing to do yet. Maggie glanced up at her. "How tall are you?" 5'11" barefoot, and most shoes make me 6 foot or taller. Damn, I wish. It's not everything it's cracked up to be. Clothes that fit well are hard to find, and what I do find is often priced beyond my budget. I have big feet, which I think is a balance thing. Almost as a rule, they don't make pretty shoes in Sasquatch size. Don't get me started on men. Maggie laughed and slid into the booth beside her daughter. "I think we're going to get along fine, Henley." Henley stood in Maggie's spacious kitchen, a glass of Moscato white wine in her hand, surrounded by the wonderful scent of roast beef and battling a vicious bout of anxiety. When Henley had reluctantly admitted to Maggie that her car had broken down, the author had jumped into action. She had sweet-talked the mechanic into rescuing Henley's Grand Prix. Maggie strong-armed Henley into dinner before dragging her into the market, where an odd elderly woman who gossiped nonstop while riding a scooter followed them down the aisles and openly stared at Henley. Henley's arguments and refusals, no matter how reasonable, were shot down. In Maggie's car on her way to Maggie's house, the fear had crept in on Henley. Her eyes shifted from side to side as the town got smaller behind them. She didn't really know this woman. She didn't know that she was safe. Her heart thrummed in her chest, and she heard the rush of blood flowing past her eardrums. Maggie must have sensed Henley was scared, for her tone became soft and calm, not unlike the tone Henley had once used to talk to patients. When she was asked about her plans until her car was ready, Henley barely managed to mutter, "I have to find a motel." Instead of the house Henley had expected, they'd approached a lovely cabin in the woods, set far back from the main road. As soon as she'd seen the small wooden structure with its wide covered porch and rocking chairs, Henley had felt a strange sense of peace. Maggie had quietly explained the cabin belonged to her and that it was used as a guest cottage. Then she'd offered to rent it to Henley. Henley wanted to refuse, knew she should refuse, but the cabin and its woodland setting proved too much temptation. "I've overwhelmed you, haven't I?" Maggie asked as she seasoned vegetables. "Can you read minds as well?" "No," Maggie laughed, "but you have this look on your face like you got ran over with a steamroller. It's not the first time I've seen that particular expression. I'd apologize, but—" "You detest hypocrites?" Henley interrupted. Maggie laughed again. "Well, yes, but I was going to say I'd be lying, as I'm not sorry." A door slammed, and a rich baritone called, "I'm home. Someone better come hug me." "Oh, shit," Maggie mumbled. Tala's whoop echoed through the house, followed by a happy shriek and laughter. "I sincerely apologize for anything my husband says or does. He's a wonderful man, a kind, loving, funny, warm man. But he is awful with new people. He makes a bad first impression. Second and third ones can be not that good, too." A tall, broad-shouldered, handsome man stepped into the doorway with Tala dangling upside down from his arms. Tala's green eyes and dark sandy hair was reflected in the masculine form. They made a striking family. He stared at his wife, his expression intimate. "Hey, Rockstar, you lose something? I found this in the living room." "Daddy," the giggling girl wailed in good humor. Henley felt like an intruder, and when Mr. Gale's gaze found her, his expression chilled. He clearly agreed. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize we had company." "Aiden, sweetheart, this is Henley Elliott. Henley, my husband Aiden," she whispered to him when she kissed him hello and eased Tala to the ground. Henley is new to the area, and I invited her over for dinner, which will be ready in about 10 minutes. Would you like a drink? I'll get it. Finish what you were doing. Monkey, why don't you tell me about your doctor's appointment today? I grew, Daddy. I knew it. Told you, didn't I? Their voices faded as they moved further from the kitchen. Okay, Maggie blew out a breath. That went well. Really? Henley took a deep sip. She could feel the tension that lingered in the room. The temperature had dropped significantly as soon as Aiden Gale found her in his kitchen. Our story is a complicated one, and I won't bore you with all the details. When we finally thought we'd found our happy ever after shortly following Tala's birth, a man came into our home before dawn and took me from our bed by gunpoint. Aiden found me in the woods, beaten, shot, and bleeding, and the bastard stood over me taking aim for a kill shot. Maggie borrowed Henley's glass without asking and took a sip of wine. He saved my life, but Aiden is a tad overprotective. Once he gets to know you and lets down his guard, you'll see he's a person worth knowing. Did he kill that man? No, I did. Maggie took another sip. Henley took the glass back, and their fingers brushed over the stem. He tried to crush Aiden's skull with a rock, and I used his gun on him, the one he'd meant to kill me with. I'm sorry. Don't be, it was a long time ago. It bothered you, taking a life for the right reason, to save a life, and it hurt you to tell me about it. But you did so I would understand why your husband automatically distrusts a stranger in your home, and I'll give him leeway if he's rude. You have a good heart, Maggie, and an honest soul. Both are admirable. Can you read minds? Henley laughed. I'm a psychiatrist. Not practicing at the moment by choice, but it can be hard to turn it off. She'd been honest, but Henley still felt the weight of a lie. Good God Almighty, don't tell Aiden that. He'll never relax with you. This was Chapter 1 of Fated Hearts, Book 2 in the Fated series published by Tirgearr Publishing. You can find the rest of this book and others like it at www.tirpub.com/BFLADE. Thank you for listening.